years, Logan. Logan is radically different from other superhero movies, and especially other X-Men movies. That's because, well, it's not really a superhero movie at all. This fresh approach to the franchise puts forward a surprising message about the world's relationship to nature, and even a meta-commentary on the Marvel Cinematic Universe that you might have missed. Welcome to this Wisecrack edition on the philosophy of Logan. And you guessed it, spoilers ahead. But first, a quick recap. Logan is the heart-tugging tale of Wolverine, Charles Xavier, and their refugee kid Laura evading cyborg child predators out to weaponize mutancy. It takes place in a future where mutants have become nearly extinct, and Logan drives an Uber to save enough money to escape from the law with Charles. Before we can dive into the philosophy, we have to understand what the movie is. It's a Western, and not just because it's sandy and takes place in, the West. According to sociologist Will Wright in his book Six Guns in Society, the classic Western follows a pretty standard structure. Our hero, often a man from the wild, enters a social group, gets dragged into a conflict to protect his new civilized friends before finally saving the day, and usually becoming a part of this new group. To grasp Logan's Western roots, pay attention to the from the wild part.
When I found you, you were pursuing a career as a cage fighter. I gave you a family.
Throughout all the X-Men movies, both good and so bad, we're reminded of Wolverine's animal nature.
People don't change, Wolverine. You're an animal then, you're an animal now. I just gave you claws.
Logan doesn't really find a new group of friends, but finds a family with Laura and Charles, and later with the other Transigen kids. The film makes a point to juxtapose the civilized love of his friends with his innate wild nature. There's Logan's violence, his resilience to pick up Laura in the first place,
not available, call a cab,
his swearing,
the f out of my car.
And we even get some distinctly animal-like noises while Logan is sleeping. As an ode to all this, we see Charles and Laura watching a classic Western in their hotel room, Shane. In the film, our gunslinging hero Shane emerges from the wild, makes friends with some homesteaders, and saves them from a cattle baron. Shane realizes his violent ways have no place in society and rides back into the woods, perhaps to die, depending on who you ask. Replace homesteaders with family and cattle baron with mega corporation, and you've got Logan in a nutshell. A very deliberate nutshell. But as much as Logan is a Western like Shane, it's also a post-Western in the tradition of movies like Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven. A post-Western discards the tired black and white binaries between good and evil. It explores what happens when these men of the Wild West return to a drastically different world, one that has moved past them. They are, in short, about living in the end of an era.
Charles, the world is not the same as it was.
Just as a post-Western might feature a cowboy's violent nature as a relic of the pre-industrial era,
you want to come along? Ain't like it used to be, but it'll do.
Logan features Wolverine as a relic from the age of mutants. He, like a post-Western hero, has to grapple with what it means to be living in a new world. A world where mutants are nearly extinct. The only evidence of Logan's former world is in X-Men comic books. With that in mind, we can start to understand what Logan is trying to say about nature. All we need is a little help from a 500-year-old English legal practice. Seriously, let me explain. Nature, as a theme, is everywhere in Logan. Charles tends to a garden, Logan wants to escape the world and live on the open seas, and Charles compares Laura to wildlife.
And by the way, Laura's foot claws are the obvious result of her gender,
Is that a fact?
Nature is also juxtaposed with technology. Natural mutants are set up against cyborgs. Twice we're reminded that Laura isn't natural.
She's not a natural f***up like you. She's a business mistake, R&D gone bad.
Unlike you, she isn't pure. She wasn't made by nature.
The family farm is pit up against a giant agricultural company pumping corn syrup into our bodies. And Charles laments being pharmaceutically castrated by all the drugs he's taking.
I guess you prefer me pharmaceutically castrated, rambling on like a lunatic.
And Logan, a natural mutant, is being killed by his artificial adamantium skeleton. There's a specific historical development that embodies this struggle and can teach us a bit about how our world, and Logan's, works. It's called enclosure. Enclosure was an English practice of taking communal land, free for anyone's use, and enclosing it into private farms, cutting it off from the public. The underlying logic is take something open, unpredictable, imperfect, and uncontrollable, and order it with rules and law to the detriment of the public. In the West, vast open swaths of land were free for animals to graze in, before the advent of barbed wire encouraged farmers to fence them in, to the detriment of these free spaces. Enclosure not only motivates the conflict in Shane,
Didn't expect to find any fences around here.
but all the themes in Logan seem designed to reflect it too. In Shane, a group of homesteaders duke it out with a cattle baron to see who has the right to order the West.
That's Riker's spread, all that over there. He thinks the whole world belongs to him.
Whether that order is for everyday people,
God didn't make all this country just for one man like Riker.
or for the cattle baron's moneyed interests. In Logan, the Munsons duke it out with Transigen over the same issue of land. A conversation about eminent domain becomes very enclosure-esque as public water becomes unavailable to the Munsons.
When we wouldn't sell, they tried eminent domain. That's strong without water.
And Logan yearns to be on the open ocean, a place free of borders and the creeping encroachment of corporate enclosure. But this focus on enclosure takes on another meaning, as Logan and Charles duke it out with Transigen to see who has the right to order the future of mutancy. See, conflicts of enclosure are not necessarily of open space, but of, well, everything. As writer Raul Martinez notes, enclosure has moved beyond territories, extending the reach of markets into every corner of our lives. In what some have dubbed an enclosure of the mind, intellectual property rights are being extended to include facets of life that were once considered uncommodifiable. Algorithms, symbols, words, ideas, seeds, and even human genes. In other words, if Pythagoras were alive today, somebody would have patented his theorems and created some kind of triangle-based startup. Ideas which once freely contributed to society are patents and commodities to be traded. Gene sequences freely available in nature are becoming the intellectual property of pharmaceutical companies. Transigen has turned the genetic information of Wolverine and countless other mutants into patents and R&D projects.
They can't have things with patents running around hurting people, can they?
It's not just that companies are making a profit off someone else's genes. The core logic of enclosure is turn any semblance of the commons, which is unmanageable and potentially dangerous, and turn it into something manageable.
The goal was not to end mutant kind, but to control it.
When it comes to the enclosure of genetic material, the naturally occurring version becomes a liability to the corporate interests seeking to profit off their own artificial version.
Random mutancy went the way of polio. We embarked on our next endeavor.
Growing mutants of your own.
Precisely.
Hence, the Wild West of naturally occurring mutants must end. Just as Shane marks the end of the lawless open land, Logan marks the end of organic mutancy. Mutant powers are fine, so long as they are in the hands of a corporation that allegedly has everything under control. Meanwhile, events like Charles' seizures become proof that natural mutancy is dangerous and uncontrollable.
I'm so sorry.
Enclosure creates a world where safe and business-friendly are walled off from the unwieldy wild, and anything outside these borders must slowly be incorporated into it. The logic of borders, both real and metaphorical, are not lost on Logan. The beginning of the film shows Logan navigating between the United States and Mexico. The border operates to let American businessmen and partygoers in and out, in the service of business, while presumably keeping everything else out. The film's ending, when Laura and her friends escape to Canada, doesn't give us a physical border, but the open expanses of the Canadian wilderness. This creeping control of business into all aspects of life frames Logan's internal struggle. A man who drives around people for money, Logan only initially risks his life for Laura for a fat stack of cash. Meanwhile, Charles serves as a counterpoint. All of that gardening stuff becomes a compelling metaphor for Logan. Charles nurtures people out of compassion and encourages Logan to care for Laura regardless of money.
She's your daughter, Logan.
This nurturing attitude is juxtaposed with Pierce, who reminds Caliban,
I got a theory that people don't really change.
and Dr. Rice, who prefers artificial design over nature.
You can't nurture rage. You simply design it from scratch.
The real battle for Laura is a battle for her soul. Will she be like Logan, a man who can't break the mold, or can she avoid his mistakes by living with a nurturing family? Logan eventually seems to side with Charles, opting to refuse the money from Laura and give up his life. Logan's nemesis X-24 is a soulless version of himself, a compelling reminder of what he could have been, a mindless mercenary at the beck and call of his corporate masters. In the final showdown with the Reavers, we get a real Captain Planet moment, when all the kids use elemental forces, ice, electricity, and grass to kill a Reaver. Laura gives a eulogy for the fallen Logan, reciting the words from Shane.
Now you run at home to your mother. tell her everything's all right. There are no more guns in the valley.
Now you run on home to your mother and tell her everything's all right. There aren't any more guns in the valley.
In Shane, these words justify his retreat back into nature. While his violent ways save the homesteaders, they can never exist alongside the town they hope to build, devoid of violence. Shane can't break the mold, and neither can Logan.
Man has to be what he is, Joni. Can't break the mold.
Can't break them all.
Laura's words remind us that Logan's violence was incompatible with the future Charles had hoped for Laura. But his violence also enabled them to build that better future, free from violence and the interference of people like Transigent. It's the end of an era for the X-Men, and Logan's sacrifice established a new world for his daughter. So while Logan shows a triumph over the logic of enclosure, what if this also served to be a sly commentary on the state of comic book movies? Let's not forget that Westerns were Hollywood's bread and butter for many years, similar to how superhero movies are today. If we want to reframe nature versus business to artistry versus business, the struggle of Logan as a character reflects the battle over the soul of Wolverine. In the ruthless profiteering world of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and their pissing contest with Fox, who owns the X-Men rights, nothing is sacred. Marvel allegedly canceled Fantastic Four comics to deprive Fox of source material. Fox will sue the hell out of Marvel if any of their movies dare say the word mutant, and entire movies are made just so that Fox, Sony, or Marvel can retain the rights to certain franchises. And should the X-Men ever get reacquired by the MCU, it would have to fit the mold, so to speak, and adhere to whatever tonal, stylistic choices Marvel executives have made. Yes! While adapting itself to play nice with their decided-on continuity, all for the sake of ticket sales. In a sense, the freely interpretable source material of the X-Men would be enclosed by the MCU. And maybe that's why Hugh Jackman's Wolverine really had to die, to stop Fox or Marvel or anyone else from getting their grubby little hands on what may be one of the best depictions of a superhero ever made. Thanks a lot for watching, Wisecrack. Peace. Hey Wisecrack, thanks so much for watching. If you can't get enough pop culture criticism, be sure to check out our buddy Mike Rugnetta at the PBS Idea channel. Whether you're wondering about the origins of the hoodie or worried we might all be cyborgs, Mike's got your back. He really knows his stuff, and like us, he uses literature, philosophy, history, and science to glean insight into everything. So check out Mike at the PBS Idea channel, tell him I said what's up, and be sure to subscribe while you're there. And if you like what we do and want to help us do more, consider becoming a patron. You'll get access to our growing library of patron-only content, including my latest video on daddy issues in Guardians of the Galaxy Part 2, my rant on Suicide Squad, and our 8-Bit Philosophy episode on VR porn. And there's more patron-only stuff coming, like early access videos, quick takes, and more. So check out our Patreon page by clicking here or the link in the description below. That's all for now, Wisecrack. Don't forget to subscribe. Peace.